Author Annie Jacobsen was recently a guest on the Sean Ryan podcast. She's out promoting her new book, Nuclear War, a Scenario. And mainly the interview is about that, a potential nuclear Armageddon that may be on the horizon. But near the end of the interview, they begin to speak about UFOs and its connection to the nuclear revolution, if you will. But also they speak about the UFO topic being potentially a disinformation campaign started by the American government to cover up advanced technology. So that's what we're going to dive into today. I put a link in the description for the full interview of the Sean Ryan podcast if you want to watch it without my commentary. Otherwise, let's dive in, y'all. If you're new to the channel and you like content like this, please hit that subscribe button, y'all. I put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day. And please, betters, hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. So thank y'all so much for the support there. And of course, comment down below. What do you think about the connection between UFOs and the nuclear revolution from humanity? And also, is this whole UFO thing a disinformation campaign from our own government to cover up our own advanced technology? Let's see what Annie has to say. Just going to play the clip. Let's go.
Why do you think we are seeing so much UFO activity around nuclear sites?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I was going to say is we're on such a dark topic. Maybe we should talk about UFOs,
Yeah,
right? Which may answer that question.
Yeah, that's a light topic.
I mean, how do I answer this in an interesting, informative way? I mean, I love narrative. I love stories. I love storytelling. I love talking. It's how people tell each other stories to communicate. You have to have an interesting story to be able to grab somebody's attention and talk about them. And UFOs are so interesting. The idea that these spaceships would carry people from outer space to us. What could be more interesting than that? So the idea of UFOs, to my eye, has been around forever, as long as man has been writing history or before he was writing history. When I was writing the book Phenomena, I interviewed Jacques Vallée, who is the sort of perhaps the world's leading ufologist. And he wrote this amazing book, which I have a copy of, like a hardcover book with beautiful illustrations in it that takes the reader through some of the oldest images in art history. And Jacques has curated them all to show UFOs, the idea of UFOs, throughout recorded history. Mm-hmm. It's always been there. The nuclear thing is interesting. I do know that a theory has developed, a narrative around this idea that, aliens or people from outer space were somehow concerned that we invented this weapon that could end civilization, and they therefore came to aid or help or make themselves noticed. I mean, it's an interesting narrative. It is an interesting narrative. All different kinds of people have different things to add to that narrative, including Jacques Vallée, including Hal Puthoff, including a lot of these people who are leaders in the field. My lens of UFOs comes from very specifically from sources I have worked with who have a different take on that, who see that as part of a strategic deception campaign. Should I give you a little more detail?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first book I wrote, Area 51,
Great book.
is about a CIA base in the middle of the Nevada desert, inside the Nevada test and training range where we set off nuclear weapons. Did you know this?
I did.
Okay. People know that now, and it's great. And then that base is inside an even bigger test and training range where pilots fly out of Nellis. But in the 50s, Area 51 was specifically set up by the CIA to develop the U-2 spy plane, which was this high-flying aircraft, 70,000 feet up it flew. I mean, in 1950, that is just nothing short of a miracle. It was out of the range of Russian surface-to-air missiles. For Area 51, I got to interview the guys who built that airplane from scratch, literally. It did not come with a manual. They built it. I interviewed the pilots who flew it over the Soviet Union, flew it over, all kinds of places. And it was so secret that Eisenhower knew about it, the director of the CIA, and the guys at Area 51 working on it. That's it. It was because it needed to be secret, because if the Russians knew about it, they'd shoot it down, which they ended up doing with Gary Powers in 1960. So the CIA knew it was inevitable that it would get shot down, but they were just playing with fire until it did. But the point of all this is when that was flying, it was mistaken for a UFO. Think about something flying 70,000 feet up. People didn't know airplanes fly at 25,000 feet-ish. Imagine you're somebody that looks up, and also the U-2 has these incredibly long wings. So it just looks like a flying cross. And the reflection of it, it looks like a UFO because it's not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, could you even see it 70,000 feet?
You could. And
you could
people
tell
did.
It was a cross?
Well, they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But the CIA learned about that, and it was like an oh shit moment. Our project's going to become busted open. The public's going to know about it. And people started writing to their congressmen. I have seen these letters declassified from the CIA. We're really concerned there's a UFO over their state. And then the CIA decided to use this as part of a strategic deception campaign. Well, let's goose this idea that there are UFOs because it's going to hide its cover for the actual U-2. Does that mean that every UFO or every UFO sighting is a U-2? Of course not. But when you look at that as a fact, it becomes interesting in the narrative. When the CIA built the follow-on plane, which was called the A-12 Oxcart. So did you ever see any of the X-Men movies?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you know that plane they fly?
I do.
Right, so that's the SR-71.
Okay.
That's the Air Force version of it. It's a two-seater. The CIA precursor plane, which was totally secret, not declassified till, 20 years ago. It was a one-seater. It had a CIA pilot in it. They flew it out at Area 51. It went Mach 3 something in 1960. 2,300 miles an hour at 90,000 feet. Okay? In 1960, think of what a refrigerator looked like in 1960. Okay? So this was like technology that no one could even comprehend, and they had to keep it secret. And in my interviews with Colonel Slater, who was in charge of the whole program, he took me through the exact details of people seeing the plane, even in a commercial airplane. The example he gave me was a group of people I think it was an American Airlines flight, saw the Oxcart as it was coming down from 90,000 feet to try to land at Area 51. And they saw it. And they all thought they saw UFOs. And Slater told me the story and showed me some documentation of the FBI meeting the plane in Los Angeles when it landed, saying, you did not see a UFO. You must sign this disclosure paper saying you will never share that you saw a UFO. So it built this mystique in, if the FBI shows up and said, you did not see that UFO.
Who are they doing this to?
The civilians on the American airline. They had them all signed. So the point of this is the CIA would use the sort of mythology of a UFO to help cover the programs that it's trying to hide.
So was the FBI in on it?
The FBI did not know. Good question. The FBI did not know about the A-12 Oxcart. The FBI was told, make all those people sign those non-disclosures and tell them they didn't see a UFO. So then you have all these FBI agents now who are prone to thinking, that was a UFO. Again, does it mean all UFO sightings are the A-12 Oxcart, which doesn't fly anymore? Of course not.
Yeah.
But if you have that information, I think you can think more on balance, for me. But
Yeah, and the deception that the government's capable of.
and also when you're talking about aircraft and airspace, it's very difficult for me to accept that our sacredly guarded airspace is regularly intruded by craft that somebody at the Defense Department doesn't know what it is. I just have trouble believing that, having written the books that I've written about high-performance aircraft. But I don't even bother getting into this argument with, it's not an argument, but this discussion with the people who really believe, that these are UAPs, the new term, which I'm fascinated by.
Have you looked into Skinwalker Ranch at all by chance?
I mean, I've interviewed all the guys who are at Skinwalker. Not all of them, but many of them. This is before, not the current situation, but this is when Bigelow owned it. And the original team that was there that claimed to have seen the portals and the werewolves and by the way, these are PhDs with DARPA contracts telling me all this. It's just hard for my brain to conceptualize that other than their perception, which is what we were talking about at break. Yeah.
Yep. With that being said, now they see all these radiation spikes right as these UAPs, UFOs, these phenomenons happen. Have you looked into that at all?
Well, I haven't, because I would say my first thing would be like, who's they and where are these radiation spike documents coming from? So when I worked with all the Bigelow, the people that were at the Skinwalker Ranch when it was Bigelow, it was always an internal situation, and it was the documents are Bigelow's and you can't look at them because they're in his possession. So it seemed like a closed loop. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say, and we were talking about this at break, that the analogy that I think of all of this, so that it's clear that I'm not just dismissively self-righteous, which I would never want to be. I'm much more curious than that. But the analogy I used was what I told you about hearing things, right? Like, because I believe this is an issue of perception, what you can see. You think of some people being colorblind. What I see is so different than what they see. Then I think of, as I told you before, like sometimes, you have like, you hear a high pitched frequency, and maybe it's because you were listening to your ear pods too long, or you were, in an airplane. And so you suddenly say to someone, do you hear that? Because it's, you actually hear something. Mm-hmm. Is that in your brain? Is that in your perception? Is that in the environment? Perhaps when people see UAPs, they are seeing them and others aren't. For me, that's my current position on how I think about that.
So are you saying it originates in the mind?
I do not have the answer. I'm just curious about what it might be. And I'm also, the reason why it's really interesting is millions of people are interested in this. We talked about this before. Who wants to talk about nuclear holocaust when you can talk about possible aliens among us? Right?
Yeah.
But they don't have to cancel one another out.
It's interesting. It's interesting because now even a lot of what astrophysicists are starting to say that the expansive universe and no matter how far out we look, something will be there. Mm-hmm. And I think what they're alluding to is that our minds are creating the unseeable universe.
Yeah. You had
know if
said
they're
when we were
alluding to
discussing
that.
earlier, like, is it also have something to do with people's perception of religion or spirituality? And what comes to mind on that is one of my favorite thinkers, Carl Jung. Have you ever read any Jung?
I haven't.
Oh my goodness. I mean, he was just, he was so interested in consciousness he's almost I don't want to say the inventor, but he did a lot of work on archetypes, what archetypes mean. You know, the wizard, the priest, the king, the queen, the witch, archetypes of humans and symbols. And he wrote all about this. He wrote a book on UFOs, and that UFOs were the product, the modern day UFOs were the product of people's fear of nuclear annihilation. Very interesting book. But Jung and Pauli, a Nobel laureate, I'm forgetting his first name, they were friends, and they would have a lot of discussions about the phenomena of UFOs. And I write about this in my Phenomena book because Pauli had this crazy quality about him that he would go walk into places and somehow disturb the electronics. Okay, so he was like a Nobel laureate physicist.
Wow.
But like cameras would shut off. Things would fall over. This is documented.
Are you serious?
Read the
Cameras
book,
would
you'll
shut
love this
off.
part of it. And he couldn't explain why. But it was known and notable. And so he had some kind of different energy going on, or however you want to interpret it. But this led to these discussions between Jung and Pauli about whether or not ESP was real. Because, of course, ESP, extrasensory perception, and UFOs often get linked together. Mm-hmm. And their takeaway, one of their takeaways was that whenever you're talking about it or thinking about it, you have to think about the age that you are in when you are thinking about it having to do with technology. So again, diluting that down, it's almost like my takeaways, they were saying there's the narrative of it, and then there's the technology that exists in the present day. And then you can begin to maybe think more deeply about the whole issue without getting the answer.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Let's get back to nukes. Mm-hmm. So, when you went to Brussels, I would like to talk about.
That was funny. Let's get back to nukes. That's probably exactly how I would transition as well. What do y'all think? Quite interesting, right? There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, look, it's through her investigations, research, right? Interviews she's done, all the books she's written. It's just the lens she sees it through, right? But she is also admitting that clearly not every sighting is our advanced tech, right? Every sighting can't be the same thing. There's too many sightings, so there's got to be a multitude of answers that fit those, right? And could some of them be covering up this advanced tech? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, I definitely think that our government would lean into that. But again, the government is not a monolithic entity. They clearly compartmentalize. Even within the example she gave, they compartmentalize, right? The FBI, in her example, the FBI doesn't even know that they're covering up this Blackbird, right, in her story with the plane and all that. They're having the passengers sign these documents, and they're thinking maybe there is a UFO, right? So clearly things get compartmentalized, whatever the story is, right? Which is interesting, you know? That's kind of interesting. Because even just by taking her own story, right, the government clearly will use deception to trick us, right? So that's why when somebody says, well, there's nothing to the UFO phenomenon, again, no matter what you think, aliens or not, there's something to this. That's what makes it all the more interesting. Whatever the answer is fascinating. But the idea that it's all a disinformation campaign, no. And again, she does admit too, is it the majority? Is that what people are reporting on? I guess part of that could be possible too. Again, I think it's multiple answers. And I do think one of those answers, right, don't know how many or how deep it goes, but we probably do have something from somewhere else. You know? Just saying. And that's interesting. But I think it's very limited. And I think there is a lot of lore built around it to protect that. Right? And that's interesting. And, you know, everything she's saying about just the disinformation is interesting, right? No matter how it's used, it's kind of fascinating, and it's probably happening, and it's probably happening right now, right? To what extent, I don't know. What advanced tech are we covering up? How much do we hear about advanced tech, right? Ask someone on the street, just like, oh yeah, what's the latest, you know, great weapon of war? We'll be like, I don't know. Yeah, it's not like this stuff is really talked about, really, if that makes sense, right? Like, it's not like common knowledge. More people would know about UFO sightings and things, right? So, and then again, get into experiencers and abductions and other things, right? Close encounters that go beyond just maybe I saw something. And let's be real, that's also admitting that people do see shit. Not just, right? Could it be this advanced tech? Yeah, I guess, to some extent, right? And let's be real, we're probably testing a lot of drones and different shit, so some of that has to be there, but people are seeing shit, right? So, I don't know. It's interesting. It's a great clip. It's a great overall interview. Her insights on just the potential nuclear Armageddon, again, regardless of UFOs, is interesting. So if you feel like checking that out, again, link in the description. Go check out the full interview, the Sean Ryan podcast, author Annie Jacobsen. Again, put your comments down below. Curious to see what y'all say about this. Yeah. All right. We'll see you on tomorrow's video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.